Good evening, and welcome to This Week in Sports, where we analyze the latest and greatest in all things sports. Alongside Matt McNamara and Casey Bryant, I'm your host, Dave Hughes, and tonight we'll be talking about this past week in the NFL, some surprises in the NHL, and Kobe Bryant's career milestone from this past weekend. To start off the show, your reactions to the Packers and the Patriots game this past weekend.
Well, first of all, I thought it was a terrific game between the two teams. These are two huge teams, and the way they've been playing so far, they've both been dominant. And to see these two go head against each other was a really marvel to see. And I was definitely surprised by the Packers' offensive consistency because the last couple of weeks they've been blowing out their opponents like some lower-level teams. But now they're taking on this Patriots team that's been great both on the rush defense and on the pass defense. And Aaron Rodgers just had another type of Aaron Rodgers MVP-type season game, almost 400 yards passing, no interceptions and 2 touchdowns. And then they had some great running from Eddie Lacy, who was able to really take out the Patriots' defense and really help them drive down the field. And the Patriots, although Tom Brady played well and although their defense was pretty good, the problem with the Patriots is that they did not utilize their run game at all. They only had 18 rushes for 84 yards. They only used Jonas Gray once, and they only used Vereen 3 times. Gray had just come off a 200-yard rushing game against the Colts a few weeks ago, and Vereen has been pretty well this season. And they used LeGarrette Blount, and he had some great numbers, but they only rushed with him 10 times. And so you got to figure if they rushed the ball with those guys more, if they would have been able to get maybe some more field goals, maybe some more offensive production overall, maybe been able to sort of startle the Packers. And overall, I thought it was still a great matchup. I hope to see them in the Super Bowl because a lot of people are speculating that would be the case. And if they do, it'll be great because you have the great quarterback matchup between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. You have Mike McCarthy versus Bill Belichick, 2 great coaches. And it would be on neutral field territory. And so to see these two in the playoff in the Super Bowl would be terrific. But this game was a really good game. And so hopefully, if they do meet up again, which I hope they do, it would be just as good a matchup from the two teams.
Yeah, Matt hit the nail on the head, really, when you talk about the Packers' offensive consistency throughout the entire game. They were able to utilize all of their weapons so well, and they were able to stifle the Patriots, really, from getting any big gains. You know, Brady was really limited as to how much he could gain at a time, whereas Aaron Rodgers was converting at will, really. You know, Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb both had stellar games in the receiving core, and Aaron Rodgers was 10 for 17 as far as third down conversions go. That's a lot of conversions there and a lot of attempts. It just shows, you know, just how much the Packers had control of the ball, whereas the Patriots were only 4 for 10 in that regard. I mean, it just goes to show the Packers were moving the ball at will. They were utilizing all their weapons, and like Matt said, why wouldn't you use LeGarrette Blount? I mean, the guy ran for 58 yards in 10 attempts. He was a bowling ball every time he touched the ball. Why wouldn't you give him exclusive carries? Why wouldn't you use Jonas Gray, who's coming off of 200 yards in Indianapolis? It just doesn't make any sense that you used him once in the past 2 weeks. Unless there's something that we don't know, there's no excuse. It just seems like one rare instance in which Bill Belichick was outcoached. I think it's just something rare and just a great win for the Packers nonetheless, but I think the Patriots kind of beat themselves by forcing themselves into bad plays.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, you talked about Aaron Rodgers and the battle between him and Brady. Just give me your thoughts on who you thought the better quarterback of the day was and who was the loser.
All right. Well, I don't really think that there was really a loser in the situation, but I guess if I had to compare the two, I would say that Rodgers was the winner of the day. He was very consistent, made a lot of great passes, but he also made a lot of good rushes, and he's been dominant at Lambeau Field so far. Very few interceptions for him so far at Lambeau Field in his past couple of home games. And so he's been really just the center of the Packers offense. It all centers around him. And Tom Brady had a good game, but there was obviously some frustration from him and from the other team surrounding him. And he played very well, but I think Rodgers just barely, not barely, but, you know, did outplay him in this certain game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Aaron Rodgers, while he's the better athlete, I think, of the two, if only just because, you know, he's a younger, sprier athlete, really, I still would take Brady as far as intelligence goes, just because Brady is good no matter where he is on the field, whereas Aaron Rodgers is really more of an exclusively a big gain quarterback. I think that, you know, as exemplified by the fact that the Patriots were 3 for 3 in the red zone, the Packers were 0 for 4 as far as converting into touchdowns. I think this goes to show how well Brady utilizes all of his weapons in the red zone and how he's able to convert from any point in the field. I think that Aaron Rodgers just needs to learn how to figure out the Patriots defense because it wasn't like the Patriots defense was overwhelming the other day. So I would say that it's just a case of the Patriots being outworked, really, not outsmarted, really. I think most of it lies on Bill Belichick, but the Packers did a great job of stifling Tom Brady as far as gaining big yards goes. Other than Rob Gronkowski, who would you look to down the field really for the Patriots that game? I think it's just Aaron Rodgers outworked Brady yesterday. That's just how it goes.
So we talked about the dominance of the two coaches and the dominance of both quarterbacks. Now let's talk about the home field advantage at Lambeau Field and the dominance they emanate there. What do teams do wrong, or what do teams have to do to start winning at Lambeau Field?
Well, I mean, obviously, especially with the winter months coming up, you have to adjust to the cold because that's such a huge factor. Temperatures go to below freezing in a place like that, and it's much tougher to perform as well as you can if you're not used to a temperature like that as far as dropping passes and fumbling the ball, and so to speak. So that's the first, obviously, main thing. And then obviously with Lambeau Field, you have a huge crowd of loyal Packers fans who get in your face and are very loud and aggressive. And so just sort of canceling the noise out and then sort of adjusting to the playing against a great Packers team that's played so well at Lambeau these past couple of years, it's just tough overall to come in there, to beat those sort of rigid temperatures, and then to sort of beat out the fans and like the noise that they make. So it's just really a typical home field advantage, but really for the Packers, they have those specific attributes to their home field advantage that really help them out as far as their great home team.
You can really thank the Chicago Bears, really, for the dominance that the Packers have had at home. Because really, since the Chicago Bear beatdown that they put on them on national TV, it's a totally new team now for Green Bay. And that, at the time of the Bears game, they were kind of a middle-of-the-road team, starting to climb to the top of their division, but they were still not wholly a cohesive unit yet. Now, all of a sudden, they have a newfound swagger. They can't be beaten at home. They're absolutely controlling the pace of the game. They're able to utilize every weapon now, and they're just clicking on all cylinders right now. And I think that really just that momentum shift of having that one standout home performance, I think that's a turning point for the Packers, really. And I think the Chicago Bears really get the primary assist for the Packers' home success now and continued success into the playoffs.
So we just talked about the Packers and Patriots and that game as a whole. Now let's go to individuals. Casey's favorite player, Johnny Manziel, and then we'll hit on J.J. Watt. So give me your thoughts of Johnny Manziel, how he played this past weekend, and will he eventually start against the Colts?
Well, I thought for Manziel, I was just very impressed that, he was able to come in this really tough situation where they were down 20-3. And, he hadn't played that much, obviously, this year. He did a couple rushes now and then. But he came in and did what we expected Johnny Manziel to do, which is make accurate passes and make some great plays in the pocket where he was able to run away from the defense and sort of pick up some good yardage. And now, as far as the quarterback situation with them, it's interesting to see, as far as compared to him and Brian Hoyer, who they're going to pick. Because Hoyer's been struggling, and because Manziel just came out and he's now maybe a fan favorite, because a lot of people have obviously been anticipating him. And they're going into Indianapolis, which is a very tough offensive team. But when they saw last week with the Redskins, Colt McCoy lit them up for huge numbers. And so you got to wonder, as far as Manziel goes, if they're going to start him. And if they do, will they keep him in the whole game? If he starts to struggle, will they put Brian Hoyer back in the game? Because these are some huge games for the Browns, because they're in a very tight AFC playoff race, and every win matters, every game matters. And so for Johnny Manziel, if he can perform the way that we expect him to, then I would definitely consider keeping him with Brian Hoyer's recent struggles. But if he does struggle, then maybe we should put Brian Hoyer back in the game because of the fact that Hoyer has just been able to win very well with his team.
And a little bit more experience.
A little more
Of course, yeah. I mean, I was finally getting used to not seeing Johnny Manziel all over the place on SportsCenter. I was finally getting used to it, moving away from the all LeBron Manziel show on ESPN to just being about LeBron really now. But, finally getting away from this media firestorm surrounding Johnny Manziel. Now that he's been put in this game, it just opens up Pandora's box, really, because now all of that, murmuring of is Manziel going to start, all the pressure from the media and the fan base, all of that had finally started to dissipate, and all of that had been dormant, it's now finally coming back to light, and now all of a sudden, a team that has a 7-5 record, and it's not by accident, is being questioned now as far as their starting quarterback. I don't think Brian Hoyer is to blame for the Browns' recent struggles and their more competitive losses that they've experienced this year, because Brian Hoyer, before this game, was coming off of games where he's throwing for 300-plus yards. I think really the blame falls more on his supporting cast. I mean, Kyle Williams was able to waltz into the backfield whenever he wanted to in this game against the Buffalo Bills. He had 3 quarterback hits and a sack just on his own. And there was tremendous pressure put on Hoyer the entire time. He was never able to really set his feet in the pocket. When you have that kind of pressure on you, I don't think any quarterback is going to win, let alone a rookie like Manziel or a veteran like Brian Hoyer. I mean, I think that the blame falls more on his offensive line and even his receivers. I mean, I don't think they've been performing up to par. I think Josh Gordon is only just now starting to hit his stride after that 10-game suspension. I think that Brian Hoyer really is the best chance for the Cleveland Browns. I think that changing now, it's just opening up a whole can of worms and a whole opportunity for dissension among the team, really. They say they'll support their team no matter what, but really you can't instill that sort of controversy or questioning people's own decision-making. Stick with what's been working for you the entire season. You're 7-5 under Hoyer. Ride him out to the end of the year.
Very good point. Now, changing from offense to defense, your thoughts on J.J. Watt and his 5th touchdown of the season. MVP contention or just another stat?
Well, I think as far as J.J. Watt himself, the way he's been performing, he definitely should be in MVP contention. And I think that these numbers on the offense, they're not obviously the hugest part of it, but they do certainly add something. You show that he's a very good overall, all-around player, that he's able to sort of be a good weapon for them on the offense and on the defense. But obviously his defensive stats speak for themselves, and he's been a huge part of their defensive team. And although their defense hasn't been the best this year, he's certainly helped them out, and they're 6-6 right now, and he's certainly been the biggest part of that, and definitely the MVP for his team, maybe even for the league. And it's interesting with the defensive player talk, but he's really been that good this year. And so, yeah, these touchdowns that he's had, both rushing and receiving, it is impressive, you know, to see a guy come in week in, week out. And you would figure after the first couple that defenders would be a little more wary of him. But he's able to get past defenders, be able to get these touchdowns. It's a nice sort of novelty thing for him to have, and I would definitely think that factors in somewhat when it comes to MVP talk about just overall playing ability, that you would factor that in as far as J.J. Watt's performance.
You know, it is a nice novelty, but that's all it is, really, to me, is a novelty, really, because the fact that he can catch a couple touchdown passes, I think that was his 3rd of the season the other day. The fact that he can catch a couple touchdown passes when they're within 5 yards, it's a nice little stat that you can, you know, throw in there. It's a nice little icing on the already, you know, succulent cupcake that is J.J. Watt's talent. I mean, but really, that's all it is. That would be like handing the MVP trophy to Sheldon Richardson of the Jets, who's a defensive tackle, because he can run for a 1-yard touchdown. Like, it's a nice little, you know, treat. It's a nice little surprise, nice novelty.
Pat on the back.
Yeah, exactly. But it's nothing more than that. I think it's important to consider that the Texans are still in the bottom half in pass defense. They're still they're bottom half in rush defense and 29th in pass defense, 29th in the league. They're not that great defensively. J.J. Watt himself can't do it all by himself, but I think that it should be factored in that the Texans' defense really should be the primary focus and not something that they have a tight end for anyway. It's a nice novelty, but it's not something that I would hand the MVP trophy over to him for.
Some great points from Casey and Matt. That wraps up our highlights from the NFL Week 13. For more NFL talk, tune in on Thursday night for our preview of the Cowboys and Bears and a look ahead at Week 14 of the NFL season. We'll be right back to talk about a few surprises in New York and other news from the NHL. In NHL news, the Islanders have become the first team to 17 wins, finishing November with a whopping record of 11-3. Do you guys believe that they are built to stay in the mix as the best hockey team?
I think it's definitely worth noting that the Islanders have been so hot lately. You know, obviously the first team to win 17 games, it's a major accomplishment. I think it is worth noting, though, that 5 of those wins have come in the shootout. That's the most shootout wins in the NHL. So I think that it kind of is a little bit deceptive that, you know, any team that has Franz Nielsen and John Tavares on your shootout lineup, you're going to win a couple games in the shootout. So I think the fact that they've won so many at this point, that should kind of, you know, skew the numbers a little bit. I don't think that takes away from anything that the Islanders have accomplished, though. Obviously, they're getting great production out of their top line, out of Tavares and Okposo. Brock Nelson has been a great fill-in on their power play, connecting with Johnny Boychuk a whole lot this season. And, I mean, what can you say about Yaroslav Halak? He's been absolutely fantastic this season. He's playing like he wants the Vezina Trophy. I think the one thing that you would have to look at for the Islanders is whether or not they can find consistency from the backup role. Chad Johnson has been nothing short of abysmal. So I think that if you can find some consistency from Halak, you'll be able to win a couple more games, probably in regulation or overtime, hopefully at least.
Yeah, I think the Islanders, I'm still very impressed with them. They've definitely shown like that they're consistent, that they're not just this fluke team that started off so well. And they're putting up big numbers offensively, and if they can keep up the consistency, that'll be great for them. But they need to work on their defense. They're allowing 2.7 goals per game, and are 29th in the league in penalty kill percentage. And they're playing a lot of great offensive teams in the Eastern Conference. And so if they're not going to be able to, if they're going to keep giving up like 3-4 goals per game, their offensive consistency isn't always going to be there. And so they really have to focus on making sure that the defense is as good as their offense. And they also have to watch out for injuries, because guys like Boychuk and Wisnowski have been hurt recently. And although it's very minor injuries so far, you want to make sure that they don't, have injuries for longer periods of time, because it messes up, obviously, the team chemistry. And it could really hurt the Islanders in their race against the Penguins, which is very competitive right now. So definitely, yeah, I think the Islanders are playing very well so far.
I think, getting off of consistency for a moment, I mean, Yaroslav Halak's health has always been a concern over the past couple of years when he was with St. Louis and towards the end of his tenure with Montreal. I think that because Chad Johnson has been so, I don't know what the word, probably sketchy, suspect of late, in terms of, being able to hold down the backup position. The fact that he's been playing so poorly means that Yaroslav Halak is going to have to play more games in order to win more games for the Islanders. And you wonder if maybe the heavier workload, it's too soon to thrust him in, if he's fully healthy, if he's ready to handle 60 games, which he hasn't been able to handle in his career yet. So I think that it's kind of questionable whether or not he'll be able to ride out the entire season fully healthy. If he can, good for him, obviously, and the Islanders have, found a diamond here. But I mean, I think it's just too questionable whether or not Halak will be able to take on that heavier workload. I would look maybe either to the minor leagues with either Poulin or David Leggio, or I would say maybe to search at the deadline for a quick backup.
So let's travel to the other side of the spectrum, the Red Wings. Obviously used to winning, their winning ways. This season kind of broke those winning traditions, started off a little rocky, but now they're on the winning train again. How do they keep that up?
I think you got to look to their star players, really. They've been led by example, really. You've got Gustav Nyquist, Henrik Zetterberg, and Pavel Datsyuk leading the way. Datsyuk has only played in 13 games, but he still has 9 goals. Datsyuk has been absolutely fantastic for the Red Wings this year, and his shooting percentage is 27%. That's incredible. The fact that more than a quarter of the time his shots are finding the back of the net. It just shows you what kind of great opportunities he creates, and the fact that he connects so well with Henrik Zetterberg and Johan Franzen. I mean, the Red Wings they've really picked it up this year. And I think that once they find some steady goaltending, again, we go back to being healthy goaltenders, Jimmy Howard, if he can stay healthy. And the one person I'm really excited to see for the Red Wings this year is Peter Mrazek. Their 22-year-old Czech goaltender. He tore up the AHL with the Grand Rapids Griffins. Say that 3 times fast. Grand Rapids Griffins. It's a tongue twister. So I think that he's been so fantastic in the minor leagues that he'll be ready to take on a major league level club workload. I think that he's a much better backup option than Jonas Gustafsson. I think that Peter Mrazek is going to be very exciting to watch, especially being so young. He's clearly the future for the Red Wings in terms of the goaltending department. I'd say Mrazek is going to be very interesting to watch going forward.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, Casey sort of covered a lot of those things. They're a great offensive team with their stars like Zetterberg and Kronwall, and Jimmy Howard is doing big things as long as he stays healthy. But the thing I think for the Red Wings to stay consistent is to win the big games against their division rivals, Tampa Bay and Montreal. And right now they're right towards the top with those 2 teams, but they need to win the big games because right now in the start of the season, they haven't been winning most of the games or they've been winning by a very small margin. It's teams like Tampa and Montreal, and if they want to get a good playoff position, then they have to start to beat these teams and winning those big games. The recent win streak, there hasn't been many very good victories. They've played lower-level teams like the New Jersey Devils. And so they really need to just stay consistent, make sure their offense keeps putting up these big numbers. And if they win these big games, I think they'll definitely start to show what a great team they can be going into the playoffs for next year.
And staying healthy, because last year they were marred by injuries all year, and this year missing Pavel Datsyuk for 10 games was a major blow to them. If they can stay healthy, honestly, I would look for them to be towards the top of the Atlantic Division.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the next topic are the Rangers, their injury woes and their tough start. How do they keep subbing players in, recalling players in order to fix those injury problems?
Well, I mean, getting Ryan McDonagh back from injury was obviously a major coup for the Rangers. Getting him back on the ice, their captain is obviously such a major presence at the blue line for them, especially considering that their defense has been subpar, really, this year. Mark Stahl and Kevin Klein, trying to step up into bigger roles. And really, the best thing that happened to the Rangers all season is Tanner Glass getting the mumps. That was a godsend for the New York Rangers. The fact that we're able to get him off the fourth line. The Rangers are finally able to remove such a huge defensive hole for them and open the door for Jesper Fast, Anthony Duclair, or JT Miller, any one of the three kids who have played so well either in the minor leagues. Jesper Fast just picking up his first NHL goal the other day against the Flyers. And we saw this lineup without Tanner Glass. Alain Vigneault is now being forced to play the most talented lineup that he has. All of a sudden, they're scoring goals a lot against the Philadelphia Flyers. Granted, they're struggling, but you're still controlling the puck a whole lot more, and you see a whole lot less missed coverages in your own zone by offensive players. What a shock. You eliminate the worst possession player in the league. All of a sudden, you're able to control the puck better. So I think that the fact that you're able to sub in these players, hopefully this means that the Tanner Glass era is over. The experiment is done. He can be reserved for only the most volatile of situations. I think that hopefully, now that they're fully healthy and utilizing their most talented players, the Rangers will be climbing towards the top of the Metropolitan Division.
Definitely. And to build on what Casey said about healthy players coming back, they just gotten back Dan Boyle for their team, and he's already been a huge presence for them on the power play, scoring around 2 to 3 power play goals already for them against teams like the Flyers and the Lightning. And although they seem to struggle a bit against the Lightning, it's just because the Lightning are such a dominant team that's tough. And what they need to do and focus on right now is to make sure that they're healthy and make sure that they can stop these stupid penalties, because that's what's cost them a lot in these games. These very close games is these penalties where it'd be minor penalties for 4 minutes for them. And the Rangers don't have the best power play defense right now, but if they can limit the power play opportunities and capitalize on their own power play opportunities, put more shots on goal, and really stay healthy, I think the Rangers could be a very good team in the Metropolitan Division come the rest of the year. So I think the Rangers have a lot to look forward to.
Just a little tidbit, just a little news. Martin Brodeur, training with the Blues. Will he eventually sign with the Blues, or do you think he'll sign with another team or remain a free agent?
I've heard rumors from St. Louis Blues beat writer Jeremy Rutherford that Martin Brodeur could sign a contract with the Blues as early as tomorrow, Tuesday. So I would say that would be a good pickup for the St. Louis Blues, if only just because Brian Elliott, obviously, he's day-to-day, week-to-week. They don't really seem sure as to a timetable for his return from a lower body injury. So I would say that Martin Brodeur coming into this franchise, it would be a great opportunity at the very least for him to serve as a mentor for their young goalie, Jake Allen. Jake Allen, is ready to take on a backup role, but I think that having someone like Martin Brodeur, obviously one of the greatest goaltenders of all time, so having him as a mentor, we saw what he did for Corey Schneider last year. Corey Schneider put up fantastic numbers for the Devils. I think that having Brodeur serve as a mentor would be very beneficial for Jake Allen. And Brodeur, he had said in a press conference that having a connection with Ken Hitchcock, the head coach, was big for him as far as returning to St. Louis. So I would say that Martin Brodeur, it's a good pickup for the Blues, at least for temporary purposes.
Yeah, definitely. I think he'll definitely serve, as Casey said, a good mentorship. But I don't think he'll obviously play as much as you would expect for the Blues. And I don't think he'll need to if Elliott comes back healthy and Jake Allen plays the way he has, which has been very good so far. So I think Brodeur would be a good mentorship sort of opportunity, but other than that, I don't think he'll make the hugest impact for the Blues.
It shows at least a sign of maturity for Martin Brodeur, at least for me, and that Martin Brodeur heading into the free agency period seemed hell-bent on getting a backup role to where he could start 20 to 30 games a season. He had a very specific list of teams he wanted to go to. He wanted to win a Stanley Cup, and he wanted to play. And I think that now that he's signing with the St. Louis Blues in a sort of temporary mentorship role, he's acknowledging that the most important thing for him is at least to play a little bit. The Blues are obviously a very competitive team, but Martin Brodeur wouldn't be starting 20 to 30 games on this team. It would be more starting maybe 5 to 10 at the very most. So I think that it's more Martin Brodeur accepting that this is him riding off into the sunset, really. And good for him. He's found a good place to end his career. It's weird seeing him in another jersey, but I mean, it's a good way to end your very storied career.
Very solid career.
Okay, that wraps it up for our NHL segment. After the break, we'll talk about Kobe Bryant being the first player to reach 6,000 assists and the feud between Kevin Garnett and Joakim Noah. Kobe Bryant becomes the first player in the NBA to reach 6,000 assists with 30,000 points. Where do you rank him in the league, and does this milestone make you rank him any higher?
Well, I mean, Kobe's already been sort of highly ranked, at least in my mind so far, because of his overall career performance and the amount of championships he's won for this Lakers team. I don't think he's in the top 5. I think a lot of people expect him to be, and even he probably expects him to be. But there was other guys like Chamberlain, Jordan Russell, Kareem, who will never seem to sort of come down the mountain. I mean, it is kind of impressive, but then again, as far as the assist total, but most of the people who have reached 30,000 points are big men and power forward and centers. So you don't expect them to put up the big assist numbers, but hey, at least, you say, oh, Kobe Bryant, he actually does pass the ball. People, just think he never does that, but apparently he does.
Once in a while.
So, I mean, once in a while. So, yeah, I think it changes your view on Kobe a little bit, but not to the point where you're like, oh, he definitely deserves a much higher ranking in the greatest of all time because of that specific ranking overall.
I think it's funny that Kobe even touched on it in a press conference after the game saying, hey, I do pass the ball. Isn't that funny that the knock on him for all his career is that Kobe does nothing but shoot. He never passes the ball, and now all of a sudden he's got 6,000 assists.
Yeah.
I think Kobe Bryant is a once-in-a-generation player. I don't think you can say enough about a tremendous talent he's been. So I think that the fact that he's reached this number, this plateau really for him, I mean, it's a great number. I don't think it changes his legacy because I think that his legacy couldn't really get any better. So I think that as far as him being one of the greatest of all time, of course he was. It would be that way if he had 5,999. It would be that way if he had 7,000. I think that, this is a great milestone for him. The fact that he's the first player to do it, it's very impressive. I don't think it changes anything because I don't think there's much higher for him to go.
Exactly.
Do you think, speaking of the Lakers and Kobe, do you think anybody else on the team will eventually surpass the record?
Or could you possibly be referring to Swaggy P?
The Swaggy P, Nick Young.
Yes.
He's a clown. Swaggy P is basically a clown. And I appreciate his humor, but saying you're going to get to 46,000 points in 20 leagues in 20 years in the NBA is literally almost like impossible because no one in the NBA has ever done that. Nick Young, granted, is a good player, but he's not even ranked in the top 100 players right now. So, I mean, it's funny, but I mean, if you want to get to that point, then leave the team where Kobe's on it because you're not going to get many shots to begin with. So I think for Swaggy P, it's a very funny joke, but let's not take it seriously.
Thank God for Swaggy P being on this team because otherwise the Lakers would be unwatchable this year. Swaggy P adds so much entertainment value for the Los Angeles Lakers. So much swag.
All the swag.
He actually said after a game once, I think the team has caught my swag after they went on a 2-game win streak when he came back from injury. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's such a great character because he's so out of left field and so nonsensical. It's amazing. He is. If you're not going to watch the Lakers for Kobe because they're going to be terrible, and who knows if Kobe will still be on the team after the deadline, I think that you can at least watch for Nick Young because he's hilarious.
He's all smiles, and then you even watch if he misses a 3, he turns around, thinks he made a 3, and then just laugh
He's
at
a
him
character.
because he's a
Great.
character. At least I don't think he takes the game too seriously, which is what you would like in an NBA player.
So moving from something laughable or funny to maybe not laughable, KG and Joakim Noah and the whole biting incident. What do you think really went down?
I mean, I don't think what most people think it went down actually did go down. Like people are saying, oh, he tried to bite him, like you would see something in soccer like Luis Suarez and his actual biting attempts. I think it was more of an intimidation factor. Kevin Garnett was quoted a few weeks ago as saying to be good in this league, you have to be an a-hole. And I think that's the best example of it to be. And it's similar to like Lance Stevenson last year when he blew into LeBron James's ear. It's kind of that intimidation factor of it's a weird way to do it, but like Joakim Noah and Garnett are both very physical. They're both very hyped up players, and so like when they come together, it's gonna be nothing but physical interactions between the two of them. So I think it was just a way of Garnett to sort of do like the whole alpha male thing and like sort of try and prove his dominance because he's been in this league for so long and been such a powerful threat for so long. It's kind of funny, but at the same time kind of weird. But I mean, you should expect that out of a guy like Kevin Garnett.
Exactly. Everyone knows that Kevin Garnett is kind of a little bit of a madman when he plays. Like he's always been labeled as one of the top trash talkers in the league.
Yeah.
He plays with a reckless abandon. And when you pit him against Joakim Noah, who kind of has the same sort of mean streak in him, of course something explosive is going to happen. Granted, he didn't actually bite anyone. I think this is kind of getting blown a little bit out of proportion. Don't get it confused. He's not Mike Tyson. He's not Alexander Burrows. He's not biting people left or right. It's an intimidation tactic, really. It's kind of like Lance Stevenson blowing into the ear of LeBron. It's harmless, really. Nothing bad is going to happen. It's just KG trying to be intimidating.
KG being KG.
And that's all for the NBA. Let's head into our Speak Up segment. Matt, would you like to start off?
Of course. Ray Rice. Yes, I understand most sports fans are sick of hearing his name over and over again in the media. But he's back in the news yet again as he was reinstated into the NFL this past week, making him eligible to sign and play for any team. Whether he will play anytime soon is certainly questionable, And that seems to be the main problem with this whole situation. Rice's acts of domestic abuse were certainly unacceptable and deserved punishment from the league, but Rice did not deserve the backlash he received from both the league and the media surrounding him. According to Janae Rice, Ray's wife, Ray was completely honest with the league about his act of abuse since questioning in June, and the league seemed to oblige, giving him a punishment. Now, whether or not it was a fitting punishment is its own argument. But then once the video of Rice's abuse was released, the Ravens and the NFL retaliated towards Rice with an even harsher punishment that only seemed to be influenced by peer pressure from the media and the fans. The NFL then went on a witch hunt towards any other domestic abusers and laid down the law, which only made Rice seem like an even bigger villain than he actually was. I hope Rice can play in the NFL again, and that the fans can forgive him in the same way they did Michael Vick or Ray Lewis. As for the NFL, this lack of effort to discipline their players correctly needs to stop. No more lying, no more cover-ups. It's time to run the league in a way that will not allow its players to run amok, tarnishing the reputation of the league and athletes of all sports.
Determining one's legacy is fickle and subjective work, especially when the person in question was widely considered to be the enemy for decades. So when it was announced on November 24th that Viktor Tikhonov, longtime coach of the Soviet Union's hockey team, had passed away, I couldn't help but be entranced by the reaction. This is, after all, one of the most successful coaches in hockey history, winning 3 Olympic golds, 8 World Championships, and 13 consecutive European Cup titles, though he is more well known for pulling goalie Vladislav Tretiak for Vladimir Mishkin in the classic Miracle on Ice game in 1980. However, he is the same coach who wielded almost dictatorial control over his players' lives, having his players live in barracks and train 10 or 11 months out of every year. His players were soldiers in the Red Army, and he treated them as such. He produced stars like Igor Larionov, Sergei Fedorov, and Pavel Bure, but also went to great lengths to try and prevent their defection. Larionov said that players under Tikhonov didn't have any freedoms. Fedorov snuck out in a hotel in the middle of the night to escape Russia. Bure was cut from the Russian national team in 1991, hoping he wouldn't defect, a ploy that didn't work. But then again, Tikhonov popularized the 4-line forward system. He preached puck possession, which is now the heart of modern analytics in hockey. And Larionov, Fedorov, and Bure have all maintained gratitude towards their coach in recent years, returning to play for him in national play even after their defection. So what should his legacy be? For us Westerners who lack a full understanding of a man so shrouded in mystery, perhaps it's best if we just concede that he was a very successful coach in a time of global political turmoil. And by the by, be on the lookout for his grandson, Viktor Tikhonov, should he decide to come play for the Arizona Coyotes in a couple of years.
In light of the recent MLS playoffs, a true legend of soccer has decided it's time to hang up his cleats. Having been wasted on the wings at Monaco and Juventus, Thierry Henry's promising career seemed to be wasted early off. It wasn't until Arsene Wenger purchased the forward in 1999 to the tune of $17 million that the Arsenal legend hit his stride. Brought in as a replacement for the departing French compatriot Nicolas Anelka, there were doubts that Henry could get accustomed to the tough tackling and hard tactics of the English Premier League. These doubts were dispelled when he ended his first season at Arsenal with an impressive goal tally of 26. Blessed with pace and a striker's touch, Henry could go on and become what some would say a god. In his 8 years with Arsenal, he would devastate Premier League defenses and go on to score an incredible 226 goals in 369 games, winning countless awards and individual honors, but the success did not stop there. Sold to FC Barcelona in 2007 for $30 million, Henry became an international part of Blaugranadas even at the age of 30. After winning 7 major trophies with Barcelona, Henry would move on to the USA with the New York Red Bulls. For 4 years, Henry would captain the team to multiple honors, eventually deciding to retire just yesterday. Henry was one of the most prolific forwards in the world, and I can tell you firsthand, after watching the striker in person, that he will be missed in the world of soccer. That's all the time we have for today. Be sure to tune in on Thursday night to This Week in Football for a preview of the Cowboys and Bears game and a look ahead to Week 14 in the NFL season. He's Matt McNamara, Casey Bryant, and I'm Dave Hughes, and we're off.